Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And my guest in the studio, happy to welcome right from my immediate left, Professor Sharif Mahmoud Khalid. He's economics advisor to the Vice President. Next to him is Dr. Justice Youngson, lawyer and former General Secretary, the Ghana Medical Association. Next to him is Suleimana Brima, Executive Director, the Media Foundation for West Africa, the group that blew the whistle on the National Service payroll scam. And then Andrew Oware-Mensah is lawyer and former Member of Parliament for Second D. He was also minister in two different portfolios. We'll be joined online by Samuel Alakora Kolgo, who is First Vice President, Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association, and Mary Awalana Ada, who is Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, the Transparency International Ghana. Now, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for making time to join us this morning. So let's begin with the nurses. It's obviously not over because they say that they are going to be watching and ensure that things are done right. Otherwise, this suspension that brings them back to the wards today will be resumed. Let's listen to some of them. Right. Okay, so let me start this way. Dr. Jansen.
Yes, Samson.
You must be tired about these discussions, right?
It's really so.
For your own, as you know, physicians, and then those who support you. We've had you on this show a number of times having to deal with these matters. Were they right? And are they still right in insisting on what ought to be implemented?
Let me start this way. It's a very dicey issue, depending on how you look at it. There's a very thin line between what one will consider right and what one will consider wrong. If you are in the shoes of labor or the nurses, you appreciate the fact that they are very right. However, if you're on the other side, you may think that, in quotes, they don't have empathy, they are causing people to suffer and all of it. But as we say, the devil is in the details. The moment you go into the details proper and see the trajectory that they may have traversed up till today, the nuances, the discussions, the disagreements and all of it, then you begin to realize that no, we need to pause, have a good and critical look at their issues and resolve them for the good of all.
Must it always get to this, 11 days of a strike?
To be honest with you, ideally it should not. From where I sit and the experience I've had in the labor field for pretty close to 20 years dealing with some of these issues, I'm very clear in my mind that most of the time, labor gets to this point as a result of the seeming inadequate engagement between the employer and labor. I realize that in most cases, the workers give enough room, sometimes years, to the employer to do what is right. And it gets to a point they are forced to take actions like this. And unfortunately, when the actions happen, the engagements sometimes don't even improve for days before they come to the table and say, look, let's look at things properly. And within hours to maximum a day, or sometimes two, the issues are resolved. So I always ask myself, why do we wait till we get to that end? I can use my own group's example some years back. We were on strike for almost 3 weeks. Now, Samson, it will surprise you that it prolonged to that length because at some point, there was a certain directive from some higher level that don't engage them. So for a whole 1 week, there was no communication, there was no attempt at resolving the issues, but rather all sorts of insults, all sorts of foul language being unleashed on my group from political actors, their, foot soldiers and what have you. And these things rather tend to escalate the problems. I remember once we were called by a minister for a meeting. We had a call somewhere around 9 p.m. We get to the ministry in the morning by 8. We wait for about 2 hours. The minister appears. And this is somebody we had engaged previously, days before, or even the previous day. And like I said, he called us at 9 p.m. So we were in touch. He sees us. He refuses to greet us, walk past us, get into his office. We're all baffled. We wait for a while thinking he was going to come back. He didn't. We went to the conference room where the meetings were going to be held. After a while, we decided to see the chief director. Whilst we were going, we realized that he was also walking out through another door. Not the chief director, I mean the minister. And honestly, after we engaged the chief director, I wouldn't want to disclose whatever he may have said. We left and everybody was bitter. And this was the highest level in terms of the leadership of the association.
Hold on briefly for me. Samuel Alakora Akolgo is the vice president of the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association. Thank you for joining us. Is it similar circumstances as narrated by Dr. Justice Jansen that has brought you to a strike for 11 days? Please unmute your mic, sir.
Thank you very much, Samson, my brother, and then my co-panelists, especially my big sister, Mariada, and then to our cherished viewers and listeners. I think my network went crumbling a bit, but I heard the initial part of Dr. Jansen's submission. Yes, sometimes when you are leading people, the people expect that you will go and articulate their views to whoever that is supposed to respond. Now, if you go to present their case, in our case, our employer, it is expected that something measurable should be given to the leader so that he can carry it back to the people and said, in the discussions, this is where we have reached. But if that is not forthcoming, and you know human beings, the conspiracy theories are many. Oh, the minister is their friend. They just go and then they are deceiving us. So it will get to a stage where even the membership doesn't believe whatever you are saying. And when it gets to that point, there is so much pressure on you to demonstrate that you are really committed to their welfare.
So did you exhaust the engagement? That's the question.
When you say exhaust, it is, there is nothing like you have exhausted the engagement. Whether the engagement were bringing out something that we can take away and go and present to our members. That is where the issue was. And for the minister, he was available for us all the time. When we strike a meeting with him, he's always there. But in the meeting, it is just pure assurance. Trust me, I will do it. You can't go and tell your members that the minister said we should trust him.
Tell us this. How did you come to the point of declaring a strike? To have in excess of 120,000 nurses on strike, about 70% of the nurses in this country.
Yes. As in our earlier discussions, we started engaging the ministry since January. were told we should hold on till the government structure is put in place. And at that time, our chief director then was always in constant engagement with the chief of staff who was at that time already appointed. Now, we waited, the ministers were appointed, vetted, the budget was read. So when they appointed our minister and we met him, he said, oh, we should just give time, they will read the budget. Then we waited. After the reading of the budget, we went back. There's pressure on us. Let us see how we can resolve this matter before it moves out of hand. The minister continued to tell us that he wants us to trust him. And then he felt we were just being unfair to him because he was new in the ministry. But that was not the case. People we signed the conditions of service with, that is the other health professionals in the health sector, and are enjoying their own. So why should that of nurses and midwives continue to delay?
Right. So if I may ask this question then. So these demands that you were making, 13th month salary, 1,000 annual uniform allowance, 180 liters of fuel, 8% non-basic allowance, government-funded license renewals. You had been giving the impression that your situation will be captured in the budget. Now we are told that it will cost 2 billion if this has to be done, and that has not been factored into the budget. Does that sound like a betrayal to you?
It is, because we're told we should wait for the budget to be read before. So how come that it was not taken on board? And if you heard the news conference that was organized, and these are some of the things that makes our members very angry. The government spokesperson said at the time they were making the budget, the conditions of service were still under negotiation. That is factually inaccurate. And we're expecting that before he could even speak to those issues, he could have gotten hold of the document, which is readily available. It is now everywhere. We didn't even want this document to get into the public domain, but it is everybody is now having it as newspaper.
But the conditions of service had been agreed to by a previous government, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you will understand that they really meant it when they said you should give them time because you were rushing them. They had just come into office.
You see, if they had given indications from the beginning that there was going to be a challenge, in that case, we wouldn't have been going to our members to give them assurance that, look, let the government set itself finish. Let them read the budget. But why should we talk about the durations of the government? Are we saying that since the government came in, they have not expanded in other sectors or in other areas? It is only the nurses and midwives' conditions of service. That is the only one that our employers feel they cannot implement.
Okay, Mr. Akogo, so now you have suspended the strike. A lot has gone on, which may have been unnecessary. If somebody had lost their lives, all this would not have been important. Now, you are scheduled to have a follow-up meeting on the 26th of June. What must happen on the 26th of June for you not to resume the strike?
Thank you very much once again. And let me use this opportunity to thank the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, and then more especially the majority leader who joined the team and were able to come out with something fruitful. We put out some understanding, and the understanding was we put them in the hierarchical order. It became clear that we're not going to get everything this time, but something will come out of it. The rest will be implemented next year. Now, to tell you the sacrifices that we have made as leaders for the sake of the country, there would have been arrears from July 2024 to date. We have decided not to bring the arrears on board and just start and move forward so that we will not have the issue of backlog of money to be paid. So if the people of Ghana are listening to us, that is how reasonable we are. That is how compassionate we are.
But Mr. Kogo, you brought this upon yourself, didn't you? Because your other colleagues managed to get theirs and they are enjoying it, except your group. Was there not a court process that halted it?
Of course, yes. But the court process truncated through out-of-court settlement, of which the judge adopted as the court adopted as its judgment. And in January, we had applied for the judgment and distributed it to all the institutions that were being prohibited from implementing the conditions of service, because the documents was already in the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Finance. Fair wages and salaries also have their own. In our own way, we made a follow-up even up to the Ministry of Finance. They were going to sign it just like the other unions own that they have signed, but for the court order. Now, these are our own members.
I need to get to the studio and speak to my other guest on the program. I wanted you to be direct with me. The government says there is a need for 2 billion to be able to cater for you. That has not been catered for in the budget, so you must wait for 2026. Do you think this is going to change when you hold the next meeting on 26 June?
We believe so.
If it doesn't change, nothing will persuade you not to resume the strike?
We don't want to speculate because the honorable members in the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health are honorable men of integrity. And we believe whatever understanding that we had, they will not renege their part of the bargain. We are not going to contemplate of resuming, whether to resume or not to resume. It is better we remain positive and hope that the right thing will be done for nurses and midwives so that they can continue to offer the nursing and midwifery services to the good people of Ghana. So we are not going to prejudge what will happen.
Isn't this what you should have done instead of going on a strike for 11 days and causing so much problem?
The strike it is the strike that brought in the Parliamentary Select Committee. It is the strike that made everybody in the country to understand the frustrations that we went through. It is the strike that made people to actually take time to listen to the issues that we're talking about.
But you are also an essential service provider. There are rules about how to go to strike. And as we understand, you broke the rules. Why do you do that?
You see, these essential service providers, that is the law's prescription. But the law also provides that our matters should be dealt with in alacrity. when you are in essential service, it is expected that the employer should even be asking you, are there issues that we can deal with so that there will be industrial peace? We just don't pick one clause which forbid us from going on strike to emphasize on that and relegating the other provisions. What is the law saying? If there is a dispute, it should be resolved within 3 days. If that fails, any of the party can refer the matter to the Labour Commission. And at the end of it all, in this case, we wouldn't have expected the Labour Commission to say that we should go and renegotiate the conditions of service or do otherwise. What the Labour Commission, if they wanted to be fair, was to tell government, no, tell them we can do A, B, C, D, and bring it, let's discuss. And from there, we move on. We have a country to run. We know resources are limited. But where it gets to a stage where people look at our numbers, when they take their calculators and they do pa, and the figure comes up, then it's like, oh, we can't. Again, if you think we don't need that number of nurses to run the nursing and midwifery services in the country, let us know. Well, because you can use our numbers to.
But you are the same who continues to. You are the same who continues to appeal to government to employ more nurses because some have finished, they are sitting home, they have nothing to do, and so on and so forth. But my final question to you, in some 30 seconds, you suspended this strike not because there's a court injunction that you ought to have obeyed, but because Parliamentary Select Committee intervened.
All the factors are inclusive.
All right, thank you very much. Samuel Alakora Akolgo is the first vice president, Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association. And forgive me, it's unpardonable that I seem to have a little struggle pronouncing your second name because we're from the same place. I was going to ask you when last you went home. I can demonstrate to you that I can pronounce it perfectly. Alakora. Yes. Yeah. So, Ejapa.
Yes, my brother.
As you can hear, the fact that they are an essential service provider, I will invite Dr. Yankson because I think...
Solidarity, yeah.
No. I think they may have been guilty of the same thing before. They are essential service providers, and yet they don't follow the law. They just strike when they want to because they know that, once they strike, they'll get what they want. And as it is, they are suspending it, not because there is an injunction by the Labour Commission, but because Parliamentary Select Committee intervened. And the government says 2 billion not budgeted for unless in 2026. Do you think they can be hopeful?
Samson, let me first and foremost start by extending my greetings to my colleague panelists and to our cherished viewers and listeners. Indeed, it cuts both ways, right? Essential service workers. But if the rule also requires government to act in a certain way and they don't, I don't think that going to equity necessarily will mean that, you can go with dirty hands. You ought to go with clean hands. And so we need to look at it and situate the expectation.
When equity is not done to you, you break the law.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that we need to look at the issues and situate the expectation from both ends in the proper context so that we do not get situations like the one that we had over the past 12 or so days, which, as far as I'm concerned, was needless. We should never have gotten there. I, in my view, think that government was insensitive. They were just callous. They were dismissive of the issues and nonchalantly handled the entire matter. Not surprising because they go to private hospitals, right? And when push comes to shove, they are shipped off to Europe to attend better medical services. So the people of Ghana necessarily ought to suffer, and the kind of posturing that you saw government officials put up government communicators went out insulting these nurses as if to say they were at fault, when indeed, and in fact, it was government that refused to capture the provisions that have been agreed on as far back as May 2024 in the 2025 budget. It was nobody's fault. And if you listen to the Minister for Government Communication last few days when I heard him on a show with Evans, I was surprised that he says that they were protecting the economy. You put the economy over and above the lives of Ghanaians who potentially can lose their lives when strike actions of this nature take place. Listen to the Deputy Minister for Finance. They cannot accommodate 2 billion. They put the economy in disarray. Seriously? So people should die? Is that what the government of Ghana is telling
retired nurses may help.
Nobody came to it.
You're calling on retired nurses to step in when the duty to make provision for these sums. And look, Samson, many a time we are quick to pass the buck that, it was negotiated by the previous government. What does it mean? Is government not a continuum? Is this a policy that you can elect not to comply with when the government of Ghana has agreed with the nurses that these terms and conditions ought to be applicable to you? And so really, I think that the posturing of government in managing this whole situation was not done properly. Thankfully, we all have to acknowledge the role that the Health Committee of Parliament, as the stakeholders are all claiming, have done exceptionally well in bringing this matter.
What do you think government can do since they did not capture this in the budget?
They have a media budget coming up. What mattered to them, the compensation budget of the presidency was increased from 300 million plus to 2.7 billion in the 2025 budget. So it's a question of priority. If they prioritize the nurses and midwives, they should have made provision in the budget to ensure that we did not get to this point. But clearly, of no consequence as far as they are concerned. They thought they could treat them anyway, to the peril of people who received services from these health institutions. I think it's very unfortunate. And I don't think that the government was right. They should apologize to the people of Ghana for the way and manner that they've handled this matter. I'm sure people lost their lives during the period that the nurses went on strike. And we cannot, under any circumstances, countenance these matters. Recall. I'm sure you are very familiar with the phrase, the economy we know how to bring back. But when we lose human lives, we've lost them for good. That was an empathetic decision that the government took at the time when we were faced with the pandemic, that will go to all expense to protect the Ghanaian people. It came with economic consequences. They harped on it and described Akufo-Addo government in words that I'm not prepared to repeat them here. They called the government all sorts of names for taking a decision to err on the side of the Ghanaian. The president was very clear in his mind. He could have also elected that, hey, we do not have any budget for COVID-19 expenditures. And so those who are going to die should die, come hell or high water. But that's not what the response of the Akufo-Addo government was.
But that's an entirely different example.
It's a question of choices.
You've heard that COVID-19 was more or less a blessing in disguise for this country because of the money we got for it.
Of course, we borrowed money to fund COVID-19 expenditures. No, we got grants, but we borrowed money to fund COVID-19 expenditures. But if the government takes the position that nurses strike, government not backtracking, we are protecting economy from collapse, then you put in the protection of the economy, the financial cost of paying for what you have signed on over and above the lives of Ghanaians who potentially might die during the period. You think it's right for government to take that position? And I'm asking you, if Akufo-Addo had adopted that same position in 2020 when the COVID issue came up, what would have been our response? Of course, that decision came with economic consequences. It led to the restructuring of our debt. It led to the debt exchange. it led to us going, of course, you can shake your head, but the truth of the matter, or unless, of course, you are not making reference to me. Okay? When that matter came up, we had issues. But if that matter hadn't come up, we probably would have been able to manage our issues better. The energy and banking sector, COVID came to compound it. Okay? But the government, because it was empathetic, took the decision that it was going to put the lives of Ghanaians first. Is that what Mr. Mahama's government has done in respect to this matter?
Right. So as far as you are concerned, this is self-inflicted?
Certainly.
And
because they had an opportunity.
It was a question of priorities?
Certainly.
And therefore they should fix it now?
Certainly.
With the
mid-year review budget, they should. They should make
that comes
provision.
up when? That comes up
in July.
In July?
Yes.
Okay. What do you say, Prof?
Okay, Samson, thank you very much. And as we talk about public education, among other issues, with all of these issues, and also with, you keep referring to me as Prof, and that may be a bit distractive.
Prof in the classroom, so you doc. Yeah.
Yeah, because the point is, I come from a different jurisdiction.
That's right.
I was working in the UK, where we interchangeably have associate professor analogous to senior lecturer. That's how we do it, because then when you go up the ladder, you don't really go through, or even within certain institutions, you don't even have associate professor, you move straight to chair. So when you are in another jurisdiction and you tend to use these things interchangeably, they may be destructive to the course I do, because I've had a sterling academic.
So I should simply keep
Sharif is fine,
right,
it's fine.
okay.
That's my first name. I'm not big on titles.
Please, PhD is difficult to get. It's a lot of time. So if you earn it, and it's not honorary.
When you do a proper PhD, right after your viva, you forget what you
see. Because you get tired.
Yeah, you get tired. Look, I graduated 5 PhDs in my entire academic career before coming. And
really?
I've not worked less. I worked in Russell Group universities throughout.
That's right.
So when you have a sterling international academic performance, you come to jurisdictions where there could be difference and controversies. You try to manage that. Let's get straight to the topic. Right.
It actually intrigues me. I don't know why anybody gets up. You want to put a PhD on yourself. You don't have it.
Yeah.
But what is this? You have not sat in a classroom. Do you know what it takes to do, like they call it, foundation lectures for 2 years? Do you know what it means to write to do your comprehensive, even before you become a doctoral candidate? You just gotta pick the title. You get an honorary one, you're hanging it on your neck, and even insisting that people should call you by that name. And when we say watch out, you say people are idiots. Yeah. I think the president should deal with computer.
Okay, so to the very germane topic which we are on. I mean, labor unions have, since time in antiquity, been existing for a while now through medieval time, among other issues. At some point in time, they had a lot of struggle in actually building the momentum that we have today, which has actually solidified them to where they are. And you know that in the Industrial Revolution, they became a very strong force because of labor essence and the demand for labor. Now, the very famous Haymarket Affair of 1886, which led to May Day, which is Labor Day, tells us how far and to the extent to which labor unions have come this far. But there are different kinds of labor unions where we have essential service providers, among other issues. Then we have health, right? So when it comes to health, it becomes a very sensitive issue, especially so given the services. And I'm sure Doc would agree with me. He has been a unionist, he has been a lawyer, he's a lawyer and a doctor at the same time. So I don't know which one he wants to go with. But you would realize that these are very critical issues that come to the fore. But where I come from, having been a member of government, is that we've come far from a very difficult economic position in the last 1 year or so, where, if you look at our economic dashboard, it was quite messy. You had a central bank posting losses, you have a domestic debt exchange program, you had blue chip investments such as pensions that have been touched, among other issues. So we really had a very overheated economy that is yet to even cool off. So if we are coming from the back of this, and we have been greeted with a very important issue such as this, the only way we can have a strong solution is to come to the table and have a jaw among ourselves, which I think that if we hadn't really had this jaw approach, we would not even be where we are with the strike action. Now, when you look at all those that are experts in labor union agitations, among other issues, right, you'll realize that they strike where it hurts most. So you even see the short-lived action that the nurses took, the OPD, which is a critical operations of a health facility, was affected for 5 days. And cumulatively, we had an 11-day action. But in all of this, I don't want us to look at it from a political lens. We have to look at it from a practical economic perspective, an economic lens. And that economic lens is where I am coming from, which is the economic history for the last 1-2 years to which we have come from. I mean, examples of COVID-19 could be made, but we all know the support we got internationally from COVID-19. We're not going to get, if the British institution could give us grants to pay doctors and nurses, why not? We'll take it with 2 arms. But that's not going to happen because this is hardcore labor issues and no agency is going to come to our aid as had happened in COVID-19. So we could give a lot of examples as COVID-19. We could laud words like the government being insensitive and callous, but I don't think that is what it is because it is a real engagement of the reality on the ground. I mean, a wage bill of 2 billion. This is what the Deputy Finance Minister said. Look, it's not like we're not going to do this at all, right? Can we have some respite? Can we negotiate and see what we'll do? And looking at this, there could be a clear agreement that, you know, where you don't have any payments or disbursements to be made, such as the COS issues, could be addressed. Then can we defer most of these payments to possibly 2026? These are examples I'm giving, by which time the economy might have, you know, bowed because we're doing a lot of work around it. We're having currency stability at the moment. We're winning or getting some gains as far as the economic stability is concerned. So when we get this, we could do that. Or possibly, if the economy does greater or better, right, before mid-year review, we could accommodate that as well. So these are the very fundamental issues we need to talk about. But to make examples of apple and oranges, as in allocations to government agencies that has been inherited and need to have actual salaries, not allowances, right? So the ISD, the Ministry of Information, among other agencies that the presidency inherited, that ought to have wages. Should we stop their wages at the time of inheritance? So why do we make government allocations or legitimate allocation of funds to these agencies an issue that we have to compare to this and say, okay, someone is being looked after? As we speak,
that point you just made is an attempt to explain what Oware-Mensah spoke about, that the presidency has increased its budget by over $1 billion.
It is not the presidency.
When it was, that's what you explained.
Yes,
is that it?
That's what I'm explaining. But it's not the presidency increasing its budget.
Because, what do you say is the
I said we have agencies that has been inherited by the presidency that ought to have emoluments being paid. They ought to have end of service benefits being paid, among other issues. Where is this funding going to come from? So if that allocation has been made, I mean, you and I know that Article 71 office holders and other people that work around the presidency, after they leave as well, they have to get some benefits.
So that's why the budget for the presidency has ballooned.
I am giving examples of inherited or legacy institutions, right, that have been added to the presidency or that are under the wing of the presidency. When you say presidency, people just see it as an edifice of the Jubilee House. But it has a broader expansion of other key agencies that surround it, which you know, and the public knows. So when we keep giving that example and try to, compare it to a critical matter such as health, it may not give, positive oxygen to the debate.
But like Mr. Akulgu said, they had met the minister. Initially, they were told, we just came into office, give us a breathing space. Then a minister was appointed. They approached the minister. The minister says, wait for the budget. That was sort of an assurance that it will reflect in the budget. Then the budget comes, they don't find that, they cry, you say, it's not provided in the budget. Let's wait for 2026.
No, you see,
that's bad faith.
No, I wouldn't call it bad faith. As I said, you inherit. How old is a government? 5 months, heading off to its 6th month, right? You take over office, and I gave you a background example of what has happened. So when you want to read a budget, you have stakeholder engagements. And these stakeholder engagements, they come out to say, okay, we all need X, Y, Z, right? It is not that government, they are all insatiable. And it's not that government is in a position to say.
The point is that this was agreed.
No, they said.
And left for government to implement.
Implement, yes.
And so when you inherit the government, you inherited this.
And we haven't thrown that away. We haven't said that we are not even going to pay at all.
So why do you now think that it's not been provided for in the budget, so wait for 2026?
No, but when you inherit something, right, and you don't have the muscle power to do it at the right time, you have to negotiate to defer.
Okay.
People take bank loans, right? At some point, they have to go back to the banks to even negotiate to have repayment conditions, among other issues.
Okay.
We are not saying this is a critical issue, right? We respect nurses, we respect healthcare workers, and there've not been any official government position insulting nurses or health workers.
That's correct.
Right? They've not been, let's put it on record, they've not been any.
Except some
explicit.
people think that inviting retired nurses is an insult.
Oh, well, you see, what I said is that, when it comes to the negotiation table with labor unions, Samson, tempers may flare, strategies may be ignited, among other issues. When I told you that they were very strategic in going after the OPD, which is a very essential component of a hospital functionality, right? If a health minister says that, okay, in the spur of the moment, this is what we could consider also doing, because the government would also have to have some leverage. It's a negotiation table, right? It's not a jungle. So if they are saying that, okay, well, did they bring retired nurses? Obviously not, right? Nobody brought retired nurses.
No, they were asked to volunteer.
Right.
They obviously didn't show up.
But you see, Doc, let me just put in a little clarity, something if you permit me. You see, the OPD, as far as we are concerned, within the health sector, a very key part of our operations, but it is not the most critical. So usually, when these strikes are happening, you realize that the first area, which is like the low-hanging fruit, where most likely very little by way of casualties will happen, is the OPD. So kindly hold on. So usually you see that it starts with the OPD withdrawal, which offers government or the employer enough room to deal with the issues.
Which they did for 5 days.
Yes.
5 days.
Post that, then the critical areas, emergencies, as in the emergency rooms, the wards, the theaters, the ICUs are all deserted. And that is where most of the deaths will even occur.
So your point is that for the first 5 days, they should have resolved this issue.
Exactly.
Because they had not done a total withdrawal.
Yes, but you sat and got to a point where we had a total withdrawal.
I don't think...
You see, kindly hold on. You see, I have experienced these things. And I think that as a nation, we should begin to look at the way we do things. Look, for me, in as much as nobody advocates that we should have strikes in the health sector, as and when it happens, people talk about the legality or otherwise of it. I always have my view. Samson knows. Maybe we'll discuss it later. However, the moment the strikes happen, if we ultimately prioritize the lives of every Ghanaian, I tell you what, we should be able to resolve the issues within 2-3 days.
Even if the strikes happen in breach of law, we should still
when you say breach of law, now let me address this. I always disagree with you because, see, the employment contract is one of service, not slavery.
That's correct.
Now, if you have a situation where government or the employer wants to hide behind so-called legalities. I'm saying so-called legalities in the sense that the very prescriptions in the Labor Act that put certain mandates on you, the employer, you refuse to do them. So that in itself is a breach of that contract from your end. However, you expect the other side to continue to function as if your breach doesn't matter. In that process, you are turning into one of slavery.
When you are building a civilized country, leaders like you, officers like nurses, must be seen to obey the law.
And that is why they will almost always engage the employer, not for days, not for weeks, but months to years. In my situation, there were times that specific issues we have dealt with the employer for at least 2 years on one single issue. So you see, it is what happens at the other side that is never brought to the fore that makes it look as if these workers end up being
I think then using the technology.
And Doc, a side comment, assessing the Labour Commission and how it works. I actually have a paper on it for my LLM. I did a paper criticizing them, the way the government hides behind them to do something. Wow. So it's not an opinion I hold, which is against the way you do
it. When you say the government hides under the Labour law, I want to believe that these commissions are independent.
They are not wholly independent.
I am saying that I want to believe.
If you appear before them, you realize that they are not wholly independent.
Well, I am saying that I want to believe that they are independent in their creation. That's what they should be.
That's the creation.
And their functionality.
No.
That's your opinion.
Yes.
So, well, when you look at it, but to use the word slavery is an extreme terminology to use in this context of discussion, because I don't think it even.
What I'm saying that if you
near slavery,
that, then you are turning it into one of slavery.
It's my turn.
Because it's been abolished. No, so do the right thing. So let it be one of service.
He's speaking a principle of law that lawyers use in labor law.
Yes.
That the contract of employment is not one of servitude.
Yes,
it's not slavery.
of service.
Yeah, of course, of service. But that's what I'm saying. But to replace that with slavery, among other issues, tend to actually put the matter in a very extreme light, which is where we are not.
So what can they look up to?
So what they look up to, we are negotiating, right? And I told you that within the negotiation table, right, or context of negotiation.
You are not. It is Parliament.
What is Parliament then? Because they refer to the committee, the health committee. No, that's not Parliament.
They made the intervention,
right? No,
it wasn't the executive.
No, government made the intervention as well. Right? When negotiations happen, it's not everything that is brought to the fore to say that this is what is happening. Right? And it is not all of the arsenal of negotiation that you put out there. But what you have as your strength, you put it on the table. And what is known to the public, you put it on the table. But as I speak with you, there's loads of negotiations ongoing behind the scenes as to how we can get this situation resolved, number one, and get restoration and normalcy within the health space. As we speak now, CLOSAC is warming up. Right? You could hear the human sounds of that. So if you have a 5-month-old government who have had all this history, right, of, economic issues that it inherited and is trying to stabilize an economy. So what it needs to do is to, as it may, engage and say, okay, well, these are the issues. But in any case, can we, all of us sitting on the table, are we saying that we are oblivious of the fact that this was the economic trajectory we came from in the last 1-2 years? No, not at all. We came from a very overheated, boiling economy.
Are you hopeful that by 26th of June, some good news will come out rather than we hear a resumption of the strike? And at the police hospital, they told us that they saw only in 1 week, they saw over 300% increase in the number of patients who visited to access medical care.
Well, I mean, all of these increases would happen. And that's what I'm saying. These are all strategies when it comes to strike actions and negotiations. The numbers ought to be put there to know that, okay, well, we are hitting the right places or we are getting the numbers in. So when all of these negotiations happen, we need to rather contextualize rather than weaponize them as political tools to use to disarm political opponents or to make political capital out of it. When we do that, we all lose sight of the fact. This is not the first time nurses are going on strike under a particular government. Different governments would come and go. So let's look at it. When we say we are resetting, we are looking at it from a national perspective, a holistic perspective.
Okay.
So for me, my appeal on this table and beyond is that can we have that engagement devoid, right, of weaponizing terminologies, you deploying them in political, armory style, trying to justify cases or make a government look bad. No. We have come a long way as far as the economy is concerned. Let's rally together to see how we can put a sustainable measure to this.
How do you suggest government takes full advantage of this temporary, halt in the strike?
Well,
because it got to crisis points, really.
Yes, indeed. As a non-politician, as a non-trade unionist, I would say that my views on this would be limited, except to say that I think what's critical is the dialogue. What's critical is to have a meaningful conversation. I could sympathize with our brother, the vice president of the Nurses Association,
Samuel,
saying that if you go to meet with the minister and at the end of the day, all that happens is that, trust me, you cannot go back to your members and say, well, the minister says we should trust him. I think
they will accuse you of even,
exactly.
Getting some kicks.
Exactly. I think it's about having a meaningful dialogue. The government cannot absorb a 2 billion budget, but what can it afford? I don't think it should be, it's either a 2 billion or nothing. They say 160 liters of fuel every month. What can the government afford? They say, well, 1,000 cedis annual uniform allowance. The government cannot. What can it afford? I don't think it should be what you want or zero. And
payment for their renewal of their licenses.
Payment for the renewal of their licenses.
Some say they shouldn't be demanding that because that's what makes them, nurses in the first place. And I was just mentioning to a friend that my colleague lawyers who are in government, when we are paying for our renewals, it gets paid for them. Accountants, it gets paid for them. So why not?
Yeah, exactly. So
license for them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Samson, the irony of it, in the case of doctors, for a hospital to get a license, a doctor's license should be part of the application. Why should I pay for my license as a private practitioner or as a private person, a doctor, to practice my profession? And when my institution wants to get its licensing done, my license is the one that will be
okay.
used in the process. Let's be fair. There are a lot of things in the general public sector.
You use same license for locum?
No, what I'm saying is that without...
No, I'm asking if you use same license for other locum activities.
No, hold on. What I'm saying is that...
And locum is the extra work they do privately.
And they can choose to spend it anywhere they want.
But like Samson said, if a lawyer in the public service gets his license renewed for by the organization or the state,
accountants, all of them,
and they also
auditors,
offer some sort of legal services to all other persons aside government. Let's be honest with ourselves. Then you realize there is some unfairness. You see, a lot of things have happened in the space, and there are a lot of inequities that we need to resolve. But for me, the key thing is that at any given point, when you agree on a set of conditions for a group of professionals, please do your best to manage them. Look, I don't think the nurses will say that if you don't implement all the conditions at a go, we will never go back to work.
Okay, so you have come back to Sule's point. Sule, that's where you were.
I support what Sule is saying.
Sule, that's where you were.
There are no hanging fruits.
As for the license, the justification is that I'm renewing the license to work for you.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Exactly.
Pay for it.
I think that it's important for government to look at what could be possible within their demands.
All right.
Rather than making it sound as if, well, wait for 2026. Everything should be on hold until 2026. I think we've all come to the point where we realize that there are a lot of inequities, as Dr. Yankson is saying. Somebody could be a nurse, would have been a registered nurse with these same conditions that they are fighting for. But because he or she is a politician, gets appointed onto a certain position, and all of a sudden, the person is getting like 10 times whatever,
80 times,
or 20 times whatever the person is earning. Not on the basis that he's acquired a different qualification or a different experience or whatever it is, but the only thing is that he or she is a politician and has gotten the favor of the president for an appointment. And it happens everywhere.
And they may retire on that salary.
Exactly. And so if we're talking about a situation where, yes, we all appreciate the difficulties within the economy.
Right.
That is true.
Everyone is looking at me.
We all appreciate the fact that we cannot be treating our nurses and doctors the same way as doctors and nurses in the UK or the US are being treated. But what is fair should be done.
But do you appreciate the point they make that, Justice, I didn't believe that was true until I recall that you sat on this show and spoke about a similar situation, that when they are sick, they are not catered for?
Look, Samson, until about, let's say, a couple of years back, practically nobody caters for anybody. Today, when I am sick, I don't even bother myself. I make sure I look for cure for myself. You know why? On paper, some of these conditions that they are fighting about, it's in there that take care of me. However, at the point where you are sick, I tell you what, if you don't take the bull by the horn and find a way to survive, most times that support from the employer will never come. We have doctors who work for the government. There are times that the GRNMA has to mobilize funds to support them.
Yeah, I've heard those stories.
Sometimes we've had to appeal to government just to come in. So even where you have something on paper, in practice, it doesn't work.
Okay.
Let me just would help with the equity aspect and synchronization of it from a very honest perspective. There is a legacy issue within our public administrative space that we ought to look at, regardless of politics and regardless of position, even within public and civil service.
What do you mean, legacy?
When I say a legacy issue, there's a template of a conditions of service that goes to possibly to a civil or a public servant or a politician or what have you. It lists a litany of issues. A gardener, a blah, 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 blah.
But we don't get it in the house.
No, I'm just coming. I'm not saying, it's a list. I'm giving a broader example, right? You could receive this letter, Samson, and it is not as it is. But because that template, that's why I use the word legacy, because that template exists, if anyone gets hold of such a condition, they would erroneously think that you are getting all of this, or you, yes, much as you may be entitled to it because it's a legacy issue.
Okay,
so I think that there have to be a certain overhaul of conditions of service to public civil servants and essential service workers, and streamline it within market rates to reflect all of this.
Thank you. Thank you, Sule. So it's okay. I'm sorry. Let's hear Sule now. Let's hear Sule finish his point
so
now.
If I may conclude by just starting from where Dr. Rashid just talked about in terms of what is on paper and what may be the realities. I think, yes, you're right, but in some instances, what you see on paper is what is the reality.
I agree with that too.
You know, and so if it can be done with certain positions, why can it not be done for all? Yeah. But let me conclude by saying that what Dr. Yankson is saying is true. I'm not a doctor, and so I wouldn't expect that maybe whatever is on paper for him extends to me. But I think what he is saying, which we should emphasize, is the fact that our medical sector or our health sector itself is sick. And the health sector itself needs cure. Let's at some point, I think the conversation should transcend beyond, whether nurses are going on strike or doctors are going on strike and so on and so forth. But the entire system is sick.
Okay.
It's not about doctors who cannot, get the best of treatment, within the facilities. It applies to everyone. Okay. If you have a good friend in the medical field, they will tell you.
I get very quick comment from Mary Awalanada. Eraba says that they call them essential services. It means we should be proactive in handling their issues. But sometimes they hold us hostage, and we should, when they hold us to ransom, we should say it because they are using their power. Elsewhere, people will trade their degrees just to be a nurse because of the good treatment they receive from their employers. Government is spending carelessly. They should prioritize. Mary, quick comment on the nurses. What do you say? So that 26 June, we don't hear them say it didn't work. Should we even wait until 26 June? Hello, Mary, unmute your mic.
I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Great. So thank you, Samson. Good morning to you and the other panelists. I would want to say that government should not at all wait for the 26th. They should, as a matter of urgency, look at what can be done in the interim to ensure that this impasse is resolved as quickly as possible. I say so based on the fact that, for me, I think this was very unnecessary. Other interest groups or other labor unions who had issues were engaged and they had their requests met. I cite, for instance, the youth tag, which the president has mentioned recently on some of the things the budget did for them. And so for us to say these are essential services, it means that, as my brother Samuel indicated earlier, it means we need to be able to pay attention to them. Because as we say, the wealth of the nation is in the health of its people. And so if the people are not healthy, we are not able to do as much as we would want to do. Again, if some of us get sick, and during the week I saw pictures on both Joy and other television stations which show the desperation of some of the people of Ghana because these services were withdrawn. Those who were working were not able to do this. So let's see how government can do this as quickly as possible. Remember, even for some of us who work in the small spaces, these type of negotiations can be very intense and they can take time. But I believe that it's gone past that. They have agreed. And so if governments have agreed, and we all say that governments are continuums, and we all also agree that these negotiations must be met then government should not waste time. And I say so based on the president's research agenda, which has so far done a lot of good to promote some of us our trust in the fact that our current president and government are willing to live above board to show that they really care about the people of Ghana. And we know what inflation has done to some of the conditions. And many of you have indicated some of the demands are not above board. They are within the space. For a whole year, if you are giving a next 1,000 cedis for uniform allowance, I don't think it's too much. If we are paying their licensing fees, I don't think it's too much. And others have mentioned that many the professional bodies have this catered for, even to the Institute of Directors. And if you check that manual, it says some of these things. So let's not waste too much time discussing this issue. It is without a doubt that every Ghanaian worker living everywhere demands the best treatment to be able to give out their best. And when these issues are not beyond government, then I believe government should act so that the goodwill it is currently enjoying would continue to be observed. I believe we shouldn't be distracted at all with these issues. And I also hope that my brother's group, Samuel's group, the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwifery Association, would not demand that 100% is done, but some graduation agreement on what can be done now and what can be taken into the future, I believe would suffice for now.
Thank you very much. That's very succinct, straight to the point. Is someone still on the line? Okay.
Yes, I'm on the line.
The final word to you in 2 minutes. Are you ready to make compromises so that government can meet you perhaps halfway?
I think we have done that. And when I started my presentation, I stated that clearly, that we've taken off all the arrears that government would have paid from July 2024 to date. And we want to start afresh and move forward. The understanding we got at the meeting, we believe, we actually presented that to our council. It was not easy for us, but we also made them to understand that we have to relax a bit and get something small, and then 2026, the rest can be dealt with. Again, we are almost approaching another season of negotiation. So we plead. I don't just want to even think of us resuming any industrial actions, because we have given enough considerations and we expect that government should look at it and deal with it so that we can all sleep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please do.
You know, there is this erroneous impression, comparison to say elsewhere, these nurses are being treated right. We want our nurses to be treated right. But if you look at it, let's take the UK, for example. A Band 5 nurse earns about 24 to 25,000 pounds per annum. That is woefully inadequate. What happens is that locum services and other bank works allow them to accumulate extra income out of the basic salary they get. And this sometimes tends to paint a picture as though this is what is happening out there in Europe or America or elsewhere.
Okay.
In London, an F1, a Foundation 1 medical doctor can even rent a 1-bed apartment. Right?
Okay.
They come cumulatively to rent a house and live in
Thank
homes.
you very much.
So it tells you that, yes, we are doing our best as a nation to actually
this will be where, sorry, gentlemen.
Arab countries.
Yeah.
So just giving it. But so what I'm saying,
and let it look as
I'm not looking, but that's what people are saying. An example, but we're trying to get a broader stream.
This has nothing to do with you.
Purely a government that has reneged its obligation to meet its side of a simple bargain that was never.
Thank you very much. Frank Anderson Jr. says, I'm probably naive, but would it be prudent to opt for a court to compel the employer to honor their contractual obligations to the nurses? in fairness, strike in the first 6 months of a new administration with a literally bankrupt economy may be seen as bad faith. We all need to be adults and manage our expectations. That said, the government also needs to engage positively and transparently. My guests who have been doing the discussion so far, Sharif Mahmood Khalid, those of you who came on social media and said, where is his title? We insist, put the title there. You heard him. He said he doesn't even want it. He's economic advisor to the Vice President, Andrew Oware-Mensah, is lawyer, former member of parliament for Second D, former minister, deputy in 2 portfolios. Dr. Jackson Yansing is lawyer, former general secretary of the GMA. Suleiman Ibrahima with the Media Foundation for West Africa. He's executive director. Of course, they are the ones behind the commencement processes. They blew the whistle on the almost 82,000 ghost names that have led the Attorney General to uncover corruption in excess of 500 million Ghana cedis, for which 12 people and 9 vendors are being held. Samuel Alakora Akolgo is first vice president of the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association of Ghana, and Mary Awolana is executive director, Transparency International Ghana. We'll be right back to deal with the questions of the prosecution that is pending.
Having concluded our investigations, we'll be filing charges against 12 suspects who worked as directors and staff of the NSA. I've already listed them, but for the abundance of doubt, let me mention them again. These are Mustafa Yusuf, a former executive director; Osea Sibe Entry, former director general; Govt Oware-Mensah, former deputy executive director; Kweku Ohinijan, former deputy executive director for operations; Abraham Bismarck-Gezi, former internal auditor; Kweku Dechi Eje, an accounts officer; Idrusu Ibn Abubakar, former head of accounts; Stephen Kobina Jemfi, who is, we have asked that he should be rearrested because we've discovered some new accounts that, contain some deposits, and so he was picked up this morning. So he is currently he's undergoing further interrogation. Koforidua, he's the Koforidua director, then Prince Agbof Ewuku, a district director, and Jacob Yorsin, management information systems administrator in the northern region. We will also file charges against the following persons who are vendors on the marketplace on the central management system of the NSA in the eastern, Greater Accra, and Ashanti regions. Isaac Osei Asamani, the owner of Stalwart Option Buy Ventures; Charles Ohomening, the owner of GH OHEC Ventures; Philomena Arthur, the owner of Brainwave Ventures; Rose Hamilton, the owner of Marine Ventures; Kweku Opare Agbofa, the owner of Franlisa Ventures; Solomon Jamina, the owner of Afarita Ventures; Haruna Mawulaya, the owner of Alfaida Enterprise; Sylvia Ntriwa Opare, the owner of Silsona Ventures. Then Peter Mensah, a legal practitioner and the husband of Govt Oware-Mensah. We have made the decision to enter into non-prosecution agreements with some
Why are we playing it? Can you cut it? It doesn't work. Sorry about that. So you're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Apologies for the obvious difficulties with that particular sound from the Attorney General. And I want to do a quick thing and show you a few of the things that have happened in the course, and then Suleimana will be speaking to us. So we have a slide that shows, that gives you a picture that summarizes what the Attorney General has done, and particularly because his sound was not the best, I'll take you through that. So as we have indicated, there are about 12, individuals under investigations and for prosecution. That is NSA directors and staff. Then you have 9 vendors who are involved. So here are some of the pictures, the names that you can put to some of the people involved. And these were the sort of the key staff, with the exception of Peter Mensah, a legal practitioner who is husband to Govt Oware, who is a former deputy executive director. Mustafa Yusuf, he's issued a statement, we'll show that with you. And then Osei Sibe Entry, who was at the helm of affairs. They are all indicted by the Attorney General. And the amounts involve 548.3 million Ghana cedis. That is what is involved. And the ghost names involved are almost 82,000 persons involved in the ghost names matters. Okay. I think I can pause here and get to Suleiman Ibrahima, the Media Foundation for West Africa, whose investigative project, that is the Fourth Estate, blew the whistle on the ghost names. You must feel some vindication or feel happy that work is being done on your journalistic, products.
Absolutely, Samson. I think that the Fourth Estate project was set up at the foundation essentially to do this kind of work where, the interest of the public is served through journalistic works. And I think since the start of the project in 2021, a number of very important and impactful stories have been made. This is not the first. If you recall the SML, the whole SML thing, was started by the Fourth Estate and all of that. But this particular story, I should say the developments are quite fulfilling for a number of reasons, because we went through a lot of troubles. At the last minute when we were ready to bring it out, we had a judge who thought that it was right to issue a pre-publication injunction to essentially say, stop, don't publish what you intend to publish.
It was an ex parte injunction. Yes, it was sticking on your blind side.
Yes, on our blind side. And then we had to then ask ourselves, what can we do? Well, if a court says we shouldn't publish, we cannot publish, let's send our petition, first of all, to the OSP. And then when ORA was also set up, we said, let's send it there. And we thought we needed to do this because what we had discovered was so scandalous. I think that in the end, the amounts that would be involved perhaps would be more than what the Attorney General at this stage has even discovered. Because there are certain persons that, from our investigations, we knew that were deeply involved in this whole process. But of course, there are 2 people who are not named. We don't know who they are. But if it turns out not to be those people, for example, then it means there are a lot of people who must be brought to book on this particular matter. And what is also fulfilling for me, Samson, I should say that, but for the work we did, nobody would even suspect that there was anything happening at the National Service Authority. Nobody would have had a clue that something could be happening, so let's investigate. Because the thing was very well orchestrated in such a way that unless, you had people who were familiar with the situation willing to cooperate, there's no way. Because This is a technology that has been developed. Dr. Bawumia is told, as a result of this technology, we are blocking ghost names. As a result of this technology, if you don't have a Ghana card, you cannot enroll as a national service person. And once you have a Ghana card as Samson Anyenini, your thumbprint and everything, it's not only the Ghana card that serves as evidence, but that once we take it, we actually match it with your records at NIA, because there is that agreement between NSA or NSS then and the NIA. So once we put in your card, if your card doesn't match with the records at NIA, it means that you cannot enroll. But we end up discovering that people were actually using just paper ID cards, you know, National Fire Service ID card, you know, work ID card like my Joy FM ID card to get enrolled. Which means that the system, as we were being told, is a robust system. People had their own ways of going behind it. And in the end, having thousands and thousands and thousands of people, you know, enrolled. You take a university like UDS, and you have people giving different index number patterns. You know, every university has an index number pattern. So if you go to University of Ghana, they'll say, well, we use absolute figures. So 10, 11, 44, 99, or blah, blah, blah. But you would find somebody, maybe University of Ghana, and University of Ghana, for some strange reasons, was not part of the schools that they were using. It's UDS, Winneba, and UDS, the various campuses. So eventually UDS Tamale, for example, now comes to say that, look, the numbers you have put out there are certainly not UDS numbers, so please, the Fourth Estate, take our names out. And we say, no, it's not, the numbers are not created by us. This is what National Service say, you know, you brought, you know. And then you have a situation where one person, I've forgotten the name, is enrolled like 226 times, the same name, the same ID, the same course, completed the same year.
You found people who were how many years old? 80
years, 90 years, enrolled for national service. People who were, you know, Kenyans, a Kenyan sitting somewhere, you know, in his company, doing his work, doesn't know that his picture is being used to enroll for national service here in Ghana. You had ID cards that had a man's face and the name is a woman's face. You had ID card with a different date of birth, and then on the system, it's a different date of birth. But this was something that you certainly cannot have access to. And so when we started, I think they just brushed us aside. No, these people, what are they doing? They don't know what they are doing. Eventually, there were calls, oh, can you come and have a conversation? Once we take you through our system, you realize that what you are doing is just junkie work. You know, you basically will not be wasting your time. And after we even, you know, went through the process, eventually the court injunction was over and we did a publication. We had some former executives of the NSA going around various media houses, blowing horns and basically, you know, basically condemning the work we did as being nothing. And I'm surprised, and I'm sure today they'll be very, very ashamed of themselves, you know, with the process so far and where we've gotten to. In fact, we had an occasion where somebody even wrote, you know, for PR purposes, demanding retraction and apology. That what we had done is a bogus thing. We should immediately retract and render an unqualified apology. Quite strangely, that the letter was intended, we never received the letter up to today. Meanwhile, it was uttered by, you know, lawyers so essentially it was a PR thing. And as we said, it didn't start. It was not a one-year event. You know, quite clearly, as we indicated during the publication, 2017, 2018, from our analysis, the first year, we realized literally nothing happened. But beyond that, all the way till the worst year was 2020, 2022, 2023. And as the AG pointed out yesterday, that year alone, almost 350 million cedis was lost to ghost names. And we had regional directors who were complaining during management meetings, saying that, oh, DG, I realized that in my region, every month before I authorize approvals, when I go onto the dashboard, I realize that thousands of people have already been pre-approved as service persons in my region. But per the mechanism we are operating, as the regional director, I'm the one who is supposed to give the final authorization after going through the validation to establish that this number of persons are within my region and are rendering national service. But before I come, pre-approvals have already been given. So I don't know what is happening. And in that meeting, what we are told is we will look into it. And nothing happens. It continued all the way until, these discoveries were made. And then they started to fidget with the system here and there. But by then, the damage had been caused, evidence had been picked, and so on. What for me is quite strange is Samson, is that, if I'm not mistaken, the National Service Authority is still using the same metric app that allowed for this scandal to happen. And it's quite strange. It's really strange that the National Service Authority under a new leadership would decide that it is the same metric app that was used for this scandalous exercise, used for this vendor system. And for the benefit of our listeners, the vendor system was basically that, let's get some people to be suppliers of appliances to national service persons. So companies can come and register. So the national service persons can go for items on high purchase. And that was the scheme that was being used. So at the end of the month, deductions are made to certain, against certain names.
I've been speaking to them, and it does appear that the accusations and allegations against the individual persons, particularly Govt Oware, about some 30 million for guarantee or pick a loan, may have been an issue of these high purchase processes, and that they did not actually do so. But of course, this matter will get to the courtroom. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Because as I understand, like teachers, like various associations and organizations, sometimes people come with products to say, we want to give your people this, but we want you to guarantee that you will ensure that you deduct their salaries, or allowances to pay us. And they, as I understand, simply wrote to introduce this, is it Bulk Life company without more. And now they are being said that they have done one wrong or the other. Yeah, so Sule, did you know that this was the extent of money involved when you blew the whistle?
No, we thought it could even be more than what we are told it is now, the 500 million. Looking at the numbers that we established to be ghost names, we thought that it could be more, because if you are looking at the current service allowance of, I think, 715 Ghana cedis, for example, what it means is that if you have about 40,000 or 50,000, or let us just use the example of what happened in January, after the finance minister said, look, given what is happening, let us do a head count before we decide to release money for payment. And what did they discover? A difference of 81,000. So multiply 715 by 81,000. And what do you get? And that's for every month. And then we are talking about years. So 5, 6, 7 years. So in our estimation, it was going to be more. And like I said from the beginning, I believe that in the end, the Attorney General may discover that the amount of money that may have been lost to the ghost name scandal will be more than the 548 that they have established now. So for me, it's quite gratifying. My desire, or our desire, is not to put people in trouble, but to protect the public purse. And I think that as a country that wants to reset, certainly these things must happen. If you look at the 81,000 difference, for example, we're going to be losing about 57 million cedis every month, but for the headcount. And as I said, if we hadn't done this, I don't think that the government would have suspected that there could be anything wrong with national service or any, bloating of numbers at national service. And government would have been dishing out some 57 million cedis every month.
Okay. This came rather fast, as in results for you, right? Because you have a number of these investigations that you have been doing at the Fourth Estate, but there's not sufficient attention to them. Manasseh, who has been the, as it were, the first editor-in-chief of the Fourth Estate, his campaign against the obnoxious and clearly criminal Zoom Lion contracts, has
the presidency
has just after how many years? Almost how many years? So many years
he's
now.
Been doing this for
just got the results, right?
Yes, I think. Well, on the Manasseh resilience, persistence, and consistency, and the results that has happened, I think I can only attribute that to the change in leadership of our country. When we have a new leader who has decided to listen for once and to look into the matter, and I think that is really.
So you are positive about expecting results.
Well, every new government tend to act correctly. I think when the Akufo-Addo government took over, the very first 6 months or so were all positive. That's when Dr. Bawumia, for example, talked about the CD having been, the dollar having been arrested, the keys handed over to IGP, and so on and so forth. And so I think that the experience has been, the beginning of every government tends to be so positive. They want to right the wrongs that they inherit. Okay. We can only look forward to what will happen in the coming years. But let me, on that basis, say that we are also witnessing a lot of the bad deals that happened continuing to happen in a number of agencies. And these are based on some of the investigations that we are doing. And we are wondering why the current leadership would see this and would allow it to continue. Because in some instances, we've seen things that were being done all the way to the end of 2024 haven't continued into the first quarter of 2025. And we would say these are so obvious that the new leadership cannot say that they haven't seen this. And I don't want to mention names of institutions, but eventually I think that when we begin to do the publications, people would wonder why the new authorities or new heads of certain institutions would allow certain corrupt deals to continue. We would only want to pray and hope that President Mahama and this government would act not just on this one, but some of the things. For example, the free Wi-Fi contract is another scandalous thing where we're paying millions of cedis every month to certain companies and certain institutions, supposedly for the delivery of Wi-Fi services to our secondary schools, when these things were non-existent.
Yes, but these, as we understand, because they are matters for the court, remain allegations for now.
Yes.
Until they are proven.
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm saying that it is important for the AG to look into all that. I don't think that the free Wi-Fi story, for example, is in court. It is something that can be looked into, and if the evidence is worthy enough, the people behind it should be brought to book.
Okay.
My turn?
No, hold on. Hi, Mary. Hello, Mary.
Samson, I'm here.
From where you sit at Transparency International, what do you have to say? Again, people are raising issues with the Attorney General for holding these press briefings, which appear to be sort of an overreach, or which appear to prejudice the matters that they are dealing with.
Samson, I do not think so at all. What he has done has not in any way indicted anybody. He says he has been able to establish some prima facie of sort, and so he wants to pursue this agenda. And for you and I, you know that the fight against corruption is a matter of perceptions and experiences. And so in this case, I don't want to go back to all the chronicling Sule has done, but in this case, you realize that there has been a lot that has been done to produce evidence. On the issue of culpability or not, the courts would then adjudicate to determine that. But the people of Ghana who brought the NDC government back to power are expecting that per the oral agenda and also others that they put in place to fight corruption, we would see results. The president promised us so. So what the Attorney General is doing is to just update us on the operationalization of the oral agenda. So there is nothing wrong at all. And let me add here again that in the way the Attorney General is going, Samson, we are going to, if it continues, and we see a lot more action into the future, we are going to be doing well in various indices, I can assure you, perhaps not this year, but going into the future. Because we are building trust of the citizen that when government speaks, and in this case, I mean the executive, the legislature, and judiciary, all putting action to the commitments and the promises they have made. When they speak, it just does not remain as rhetoric, and they do not rebuff us when we come to then create or also profess some of the great ideas that we put together as our researchers, as our investigative pieces, working together as civil society and also as citizens. They are working on them. Then trust will be built. Then the people of Ghana would also then reflect these in some of the researches we carry out, either by international experts responding to them when it comes to the CPI, academics and private sector, or the citizens themselves speaking to this fact. For me individually, I believe that the optics thus far have been very good from the president and also the Attorney General. And I hope that, like Sule said, usually during the first year of a new government, we tend to see a lot of this good faith being displayed. However, as we go on, then they become defensive. They tend to want to also support their members and do things that are in the contrary. I believe that in this case, we should see a president who wishes to leave a legacy for the people of Ghana, remaining on this course that he is charting, and getting all those who are behind him to support. And I'm very sure if the Attorney General keeps this up, and also the SP who has been doing some of these in the past, we would see people of Ghana wholeheartedly following and supporting this agenda. And I believe we would make some gains. It would then be in the hands or in the mouth of the judges to determine whether those people are guilty or not.
The Attorney General has said at this presser that some of the people have approached for plea bargain, so they are taking the money back. They are not going to prosecute them. Some of them too, they are going to use them as prosecution witnesses. So they have a non-prosecution agreement with some of these people. There are members of society who are not happy about that, that if people have done wrong, prosecute them, rather than say, come and bring money back and I let you go. What do you say about that?
Something that is true. As much as that is true, across the globe, and also Ghana not being an exception, we have seen increasingly that the issue of plea bargaining has come to stay. And for us in Ghana, I believe that I personally would want to see everyone who is guilty or complicit being dealt with. But then sometimes these issues, you realize perhaps looking at the merit of the various cases, perhaps you would not have a lot to get from most of those who are also part of these schemes. And so if you get them to then establish fundamentally and add evidence to these cases, to get the very big ones who are very guilty to get to be punished for their wrongs, then it is a good thing. It's a win-win situation, and it's not just in Ghana or perhaps for this Attorney General. I remember in the past government, which was just booted out, there was something like that when it came to the issue of the banking, where at Oware-Mensah there was something like that, but then he reneged on the promise and was subsequently taken to prison. So it's not new. It's happened across regimes. It's happened across the globe, and increasingly it's become one of the approaches to the delivery of justice. Let's get back our monies, and then we see how it goes. And if you remember, the Attorney General also indicated that in some of the instances, others also came. But looking at the merits of the cases and what they were presenting, they thought those were not enough, and they declined those. So it means that it's not in every case they are picking plea bargains. Okay. And if you listen to the SP as well, in the past, he's also very much amenable to the issue around this approach of ensuring that we get back our monies, recover the loot, recover assets, and then we pursue the agenda of anti-corruption going forward.
Right. For the special prosecutor, they have a specific provision in their act that says that they should do recoveries, but it should apply to everybody else. And we have also elevated the plea bargain regime by passing a law in 2022, led by Govt to amend a portion of our Criminal and Other Offences Procedure Act 30 to give room for all of this. I participated in the NSS scandal in 2015, 2016, and we used a different law to do plea bargain for some of our clients. Now, Justice, two non-lawyers have spoken, and I want to bring you in a bit to see this.
I thought you were going
first
for the politician.
No, I'll come to the two of you. I'll come to the two of you. First, the issues that are being raised about going to the press and talking about the cases you are filing. The last time I had to say here, as part of my research for my show, that in the US, the DA's offices, they do these things. But of course, they do it with ethical considerations. And so before I came on today, I had to go check again. And I checked recent example, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg held press briefings on high-profile cases, including the indictment of former President Trump in 2023. He discussed the legal proceedings and broader justice initiatives in interviews, reflecting on the public scrutiny surrounding such cases. I've checked elsewhere, other jurisdictions. They do almost the same thing. I've done a list from Los Angeles, Fulton, Cook County, and other places where they do this. Do you share the view of others that the Attorney General should not be doing this thing that the SP2 has been doing? They shouldn't be doing because it's prejudicial. Then Mary also speaks about the fact that when it gets into the court, it's left these two people. It's become the judges and their job. What they do with them, that is not the business of these other people. Justice Amadou Tanko, just this week, was speaking and said the judiciary has a role in the extractive sector. And he said that judges must act as custodians of legal accountability. They are the stewards of justice, where community rights, state interests, and private interests intersect. He says that the judiciary has a responsibility to safeguard land and mineral resources and so on and so forth. This was at a training that he was saying. Balance the two, so that in the end, people don't get disappointed. When people are discharged, then they say, oh, the judges have left them.
Yes, Samson, I think the splits or different opinions are generally arising because, one, this approach is relatively new to us as a country, relatively new. Just as you mentioned, in the US, this is common practice. Other jurisdictions also have same. Unfortunately, I think we are where we are just because of the way ORA itself started. The footprints were more of a political activity because it was part of the campaign and, party functionaries, everybody was on. And then we get to a point where we are looking at the issues proper.
where
free SHS was a political activity.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's the way it started. Then we are at the point where we need to look at the core issues. The evidences available, the investigations, what the findings are looking like, the potential charges that can be slapped on the alleged persons, and then, of course, what will actually happen in courts. So I see it this way, that we started off with the political foot, but we are now actually getting into the legalities proper. And if you look at what the AG did yesterday, I think it was a big improvement on the previous one. He's also very convinced in his mind that, look, these are things that are done elsewhere. And for him, once he's in office, he wants to pursue it and make sure that as much as possible, some level of information is shared with the general population. But one thing I liked about yesterday was he kept saying that these are allegations. These are alleged, culprits. And that charges in the realm of conspiracy to steal, stealing, and all of those things are the bits that are actually going to be presented to the court. So I think that, honestly, this fight against corruption is one that sometimes there has to be a bit of sunlight shown on everything that is happening. Sometimes information will have to be given for the population to also get abreast with some of the things that have happened. Because, you see, the mere fact that we know that NSA, these activities are happening there, it will put a lot more people on their toes now. Because in 2015, 16, 17, you were part of the things that happened there in terms of defending some of the people involved and all that. And fast forward, from 17 to 2025, same NSA. It's just that it's transitioning from NSS to NSA. The issues are still hovering around them. But I can tell you, with what is happening now, whoever is there now will have to be very careful in the approach to things. But I think that the two key words, probity and accountability, which used to be part of our general lingua as a country, somewhere along the line, we all lost the values in there.
Actually, the NDC's motto.
Well, it started with PNDC. Yeah. So we all lost the values.
It's in our constitution.
Yes, it's in our constitution.
It's in our preamble.
You see, we all lost the values in there. And I think that these are some of the things that gradually will bring that to the fore. And we should get to a point where I believe if we really want to fight corruption and corruption-related activities, some of these activities should become formalities and well ingrained in our structures of governance. So that when anybody is put in office, whether it's a political angle, whether it's a technocrat, whether you're a bureaucrat, or even a private person, an artificial legal entity dealing with entities of state or appointees of state, who are the custodians of our resources, you'll be very mindful that one day you'll be called to account. And if we could even end up enshrining some of these things in law, such that every appointee or every government machinery activity, you know that periodically some of these investigations will be conducted and people who may have fallen foul will be actually punished properly. But in all this, I think the ultimate is that we should ensure that these activities are conducted under the ambit of proper rule of law.
As in the prosecution processes, yes, of course.
We should not entangle these activities with the political ones that we usually do. Let the courts do their work properly. Let the judges, the lawyers, and all persons involved do their work properly. As we were taught in school, the AG himself should also be mindful in the sense that the AG is there representing fairness and justice. His core duty is not to ensure that somebody is sent to jail, but to ensure that fairness and justice prevails. And if at the end of the proceedings, the judges decide that you have to go to jail, he would have done his work.
All right.
So let's take the political angle off and make sure that we enshrine this in the rule of law.
Thank you. So Oware-Mensah, so there's something that caught my interest when the Attorney General was speaking. Some 8.25 million Ghana cedis was said to have been paid into an eSwish account linked to the former director of SESIBE entry in 2023. Then they conducted a search, and this eSwish card was found in his house. So I asked myself, okay, obviously the reason people get worried when there are search warrants being taken to their homes, and now there are complaints that they are searching fridges. So that may be an issue. What do you say?
Well, I guess that if these things are done in accordance with law, I really don't have any difficulty with it. And I must state from the very outset that I think that the Fourth Estate ought to be commended for the work that they did in exposing the alleged rot at the National Service Authority and for the investigations that have been conducted so far by the Attorney General and the state security agencies. I don't think that as public officers, we necessarily ought to shy away from accountability. It is part of the work that we do.
Can you hold on for a second for me? The Member of Parliament for Yaba Kubori constituency, the Honorable Mustafa Yusuf, has issued a statement, and he says that my attention has come to a press conference by Attorney General held on June 13, 2025, and I wish to categorically deny any alleged wrongdoing. That said, it is my fervent belief that once you hold public office, you should at all material times and at whatever cost be ready, willing, and able to account for your stewardship. Therefore, I wish to state that I am ready, willing, and able to account for my stewardship at the National Service Scheme from February 2017 to January 6, 2021. Consequently, I welcome any opportunity to do so, including but not limited to having my day in a court of competent jurisdiction. I therefore urge all well wishers, friends, family, constituents, members of the New Patriotic Party, and the general public to be calm, knowing very well that I have throughout my public life served with diligence and honesty. Signed, Mustafa Yusuf, MP.
Yes, I've seen that statement, and I'm glad that he's come out to put a statement like this out there in the public domain. But like I was saying, I had the privilege of serving in the Akufo-Addo administration. I think it was a government made of good men, well-intentioned, came with a clear objective of serving our country. But I recognize that in every house there's a Mensah. And so you may find bad nuts in government. And so if an investigation is conducted and people are found to have misconducted themselves, then they ought to face the music, as it were. For me, this exercise allows you to do two things, right? That people who have actually committed an offense are held accountable, and those who may not be found culpable have the opportunity to clear their name. And so that's why I'm excited that Mustafa has come out to issue a statement. Ultimately, he will have his day in court, and wherever the chips will fall, we know what the rules are.
You're a gentleman. That's a statesmanly comment you have made. Statement you have made right now.
The Attorney General has to establish beyond all reasonable doubt that these offenses have indeed been committed. I've been in government before. I know the kinds of allegations that have been made against my person. In fact, in transactions that bore a semblance to my name, was attributed to my person as being the owner of that transaction. I make reference to Ejapa. This was a transaction that the government of Ghana had undertaken pursuant to an act of parliament, setting up the gold royalties company to do that,
it will take very ignorant
collateralization.
people,
but
very
people,
ignorant
because
people to personalize that,
they said that,
because there was no basis to do that. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's good when an investigation is conducted and I get the opportunity to respond. So far, I've not been called. So maybe the government of the day recognizes that some of these things were just propaganda.
And the minister under whom you were deputy in energy,
yes,
Matthew Poku Prempeh,
yes,
he's come public to say he's been attending to
indeed I've been attending
invitations,
with him as
and he's gone through all these processes without any noise.
Yes, I'm personally involved in the matters that he's been investigated on.
Okay,
one of his counsel, and I've attended upon the National Intelligence or Investigations Bureau on many occasions. We were there last Thursday. Since he himself has come out to speak to it, I don't think that it will be out of place for me to confirm that indeed that was the case. And we will go to the
Attorney General has come out to say, yes, he's been doing that, and it's possible that in the end, nothing may be found against him, and he will walk. So when you contrast that, with the others, Oforiata, Wuntumi, and the whole party and everybody, Koka,
see,
what is that?
I said something earlier. If you do it in accordance with law, I'm not sure that people would rise up in the manner that they have with respect to Ken Oforiata and Wuntumi. You saw the circumstances under which Wuntumi was arrested. He had actually been invited to the Criminal Investigations Department of the Ghana Police Service. He'd been granted bail, and then on his way home, you undertake a Rambo-style arrest, and
that's a different law enforcement, and they are entitled to arrest him. What's wrong?
That's what I'm saying. That it's the way and manner that you do it that would generate the kind of response that you get from party people.
Yeah, but like you said in Opoku Prempeh's case, they invite him, he goes. They invite him, he goes. But in these people, there have been invitations, and the response has not been the best. So they arrest.
I'm not so sure Wuntumi resisted or refused to attend any investigation.
Yeah, they tell us it took a long time.
I'm not so sure. We saw the letters that his lawyers had written. Okay, it was made public that they had invited him, and he had indicated that he was going to come.
Was there really a Rambo-style arrest?
But it was said in Parliament.
It was there. Like, where's the evidence? That's why I'm asking. Was there a Rambo-style?
Okay.
Maybe sometimes.
And so to that extent,
things out there that are not.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. Now, DAs in other jurisdictions holding press conferences, engaging the media with respect to matters that they are investigating or they are prosecuting. As usual, I saw the Donald Trump, we saw the PDD one, and the Epstein ones, and all that. We see it on international media. But the context is important. Okay, these are Donald Trump. I'm not sure the DA engaged the media when the bill of indictment had not been filed. They had actually gone ahead to file a bill of indictment in court and then engage the media to speak about it. But in this case, I'm not so sure that's what is happening. Okay, I think that yesterday's press conference, beyond the substantive issues that were raised in there, was purely political, intended to divert attention from the nurses' strike. Of course, at the time that they programmed, they had no clue that the nurses and midwives were going to call off their strike by the time they finished their press conference. I'm not so sure they would have held it. And why do I say so? The Attorney General held a press conference on the 30th of April and said to the people of Ghana that AG to file criminal charges in SkyTrain NSS ghost name scandals next week. Relative to the NSS specifically, this is what he said. Additionally, he indicated that the investigations into the NSS scheme, ghost names, have progressed steadily. We will file charges against some of the persons involved from the first week of May, he confirmed. 6 weeks down the line, 6 weeks down the line, he comes to hold another press conference and tells us that he will now file charges from 1st of July. So what was the purpose of the press conference? What was the purpose? It was purely to divert attention.
Okay.
And to take away the recklessness with which the government was managing the nursing situation. That was creating needless death of Ghanaians. Otherwise, I fail to see how the Attorney General, who made those commitments as far back as 6 weeks ago, comes to hold a press conference
instead of going directly to file
the same matters that he had mentioned over and over and over. In fact, in March, he mentioned these same matters and comes to tell us that now he's now going to file the criminal charges.
The only difference is that in those press conferences, he will single out a particular matter and give detail. And NSS didn't give detail until yesterday, right?
Are you denying that he held this press conference? And
no, not at all.
This is My Joy Online, your own platform.
Correct.
And he said that we are going to charge the NSS people.
You're right.
In the first week of May. Where are we today? And what did he tell us yesterday?
We should be asking that question. What happened?
So you see, that's what raises the issue of all this media, circles, if you like, that the AG is engaging in these matters. When people are culpable, you conduct your investigation in the quiet, like he's doing in some cases, rightfully so. And when you are ready to prosecute, you proceed to court, file your charges. If at that point you want to inform the people of Ghana that this is a step that I've taken following the investigations that I've conducted, what's the big deal? After all, people are entitled to know. I don't have any difficulty with transparency. But to tell us one thing on one occasion, commit to do a certain act post that, you don't do it, and then subsequently come when a matter of public interest is brewing.
Thank you. Now let's come
and tell us that it's only in July that you are going to proceed. And indeed, if you permit me.
Wait, because you really want to talk about the next issue, I want us to save time so you can speak about it.
Very well.
Thank you. So facts. Yeah. Evans will always say keeping them honest. Yeah. So in the briefings that the district attorneys do, some are actually done ahead of the prosecution. They are done during the investigations. So it's not always the case that they file charges before they do them. And in the US, they say that when prosecutors provide, they do general information about the charges, the legal basis, and the procedural steps to maintain public confidence in the justice system.
This whole thing, or this case, falls under the broader umbrella of oral. And oral, as you may know, I wouldn't call it political. I'll say public interest. Yeah, it's more public interest than political.
Subject to law and all the legal issues and ethical considerations.
The president cannot sit in the Jubilee House and say, I'm taking A to jail because he or she has done X wrong. So that depoliticizes the aspect of oral. And given this, where it was birthed, was a manifesto promise. We went to Winneba, we spoke to the whole world that this is what we're going to do as a political party if we were given the mandate as a government, which, alhamdulillah, we are in government. We are trying to ensure that the right thing is done. So having this case under oral, which is a public interest case, it is only right for an attorney general to update the public. Just test the pulse of the public with how eager they want to have updates, even on oral. Apart from the transparency dimension of it and the public interest of it, it's more heightened than ever before.
What are you going to do if you fail to secure conviction for these people in court?
We haven't gotten there because we say we have an oral.
So you have to be cautious.
Yeah, so part of being cautious is what? Having these presses. They're very important. Because, Anyenini, my elder brother, Dr. Dominic Anyenini, we know it's an astute lawyer. He understands all of these games, right? He understands who is, alleged to have done something wrong or who is guilty whatsoever before putting it out there. And in all of what he's been doing, he's not accused anyone of any wrongdoing. He's only spelling out and giving a chronology of if...
he doesn't have to accuse anybody.
Yes, so I'm coming to that. Yeah. So you mentioned...
if you tell me that somebody 8 point something million got, sent to him through e-switch, and then you did a search in his home, and you found the e-switch, the card under his bed.
Well, you are speaking.
Do I need you to tell me that you are accusing the person of anything?
Yeah, but it takes such press conferences for you to have a full appreciation of what you are telling us now in studio.
Okay.
So thanks to
that was not him. That was from the AG.
No, but yeah, that's from the AG. And that's a press conference. So that's saying that it took that press conference for him to have full appreciation of what he's sharing with us in studio, right? And that is part of the transparency process and also the roadmap leading to oral and also having justice being done. You know, Samson, language is very chaotic, right? Especially so when it becomes a matter of public interest. If we take ourselves back to maybe probably criminal history, you would realize that there was this famous case of Derek Bentley. It was on joint enterprise, right, where Derek and his accomplice Chris went about trying to have a burglary issue. And in the act of it, you know, Derek was deemed as 19 years old but had the brain of a 10-year-old. And in the process of it, a police officer emerged and asked for the gun. And what he said was, what Bentley told Chris was that, Chris, give it to him. Chris, give it to him. The interpretation of give it to him was to shoot him. In other words, it could be interpreted as give him the gun. Now, you realize that this guy went to jail and he was deemed as wrong. He actually was hanged at the time because in Britain, there was death by hanging. Right, the conviction was quashed after a very long time, a 40-year campaign. Why am I boring you with all of this? Is the chaotic nature of language. And that led to a 40-year campaign, right, to, at the end of the day, we had it being expunged from the common law in Britain, among other issues. So if an attorney general, for that matter, is seen as coming to the forefront, right, using a platform to actually spell out these issues to say, okay, XYZ had happened in this particular case. I mean, the fact that he said, I'm going to court next week or next month, and he's unable to go to court, does not mean he's done something wrong.
And he should be explaining that.
No, you can ask for an explanation, and I'm sure he has a tangible explanation to that. Right?
But
because if he didn't...
We shouldn't even wait. You see, so... Hold on. Hold on. When you make such promises to us, and genuinely they are constraints, it is just fair that in your next briefing, you let us...
I'm sure he's going to come to all of that, right?
He had opportunity to do so yesterday. He didn't.
I'm sure he's come. Yesterday was dedicated to a big scandal, responding to the Fourth Estate's investigations, which was very important. Sometimes, you know, in matters of law, of public interest, you don't need a dilution.
I tell you that I'm filing charges against in the NSS matter.
Yes.
I come to talk about the NSS matter. I don't tell you why I have not filed the charges.
No, well, I mean, new evidence could have emerged. There could be some technical delays. There could be procedural errors.
Yeah, so just give us a one-liner.
So now, if he comes
work is still in progress.
Well, I mean,
because of one or two developments,
look, you see,
it hasn't happened.
The office of the AG.
So you proceed to your substantive
the office of the AG
commentary.
Institution. Right? This is fair commentary you are making. And Dr. Anyenini, I know, would come out to, you know, give clarity to this. So
he's my professor. So this is nothing, you know, personal.
I'm not saying this.
All of us.
But why are you guys now running away?
No. You're not running away. I said this was an improvement over the first.
Some actually have the theory
Yeah.
that if he does all of these things and then comes public, he in that situation he ends up holding himself accountable.
Yes.
So if he says, I'm going to put Samson on trial because he's done ABC, he will not be able to change that position later. Or that it shuts the door for Samson to go behind the scenes, you know, and try and beg out of the place. So once he does that, everybody is...
You see, look, he's a public lawyer.
Okay.
He has his legal strategy. This process might be part of his legal strategy, which is not wrong. It's a wrong in law, right? Maybe part of his legal strategy. And as Sule rightly said, there are some names he was expecting or they were expecting. So this transparent process of him giving these updates. I mean, you and I sitting here had some people who worked at the NSS that we expected, maybe by virtue of XYZ, they should have been part of the list. Why are they not part of the list? Then people like Sule go back to do their investigations.
Okay.
So for me, I see it as more of a very tangible, and we need to encourage more of it as far as transparency and public discourses and public interest cases is concerned, right? More so to do with oral, where there is heightened public interest. So for me, I really see nothing wrong with it. Whether it's even done in the US, it's done in Ireland, wherever. What he's doing is a novelty that ought to be applauded.
The public actually says the government is slow in prosecuting the oral cases.
That. So if he's coming out to really say this, but we know the wheel of justice, as they always say, you lawyers
grind slowly,
right? But we ought not to send innocent people to jail, which is why I gave the example of Derek Bentley, among other issues, to actually buttress my point that we are doing this within the confines of the law, and we're having a full appreciation of what is happening. I know Honorable is
propaganda that is leading
eager to get on a political tangent with all of these.
It's pure propaganda.
It's not propaganda. And as in general, a minister of justice is doing his work, and you're referring to it as propaganda.
I've told you here.
Let's not downplay.
Attention from the next
Samson, let me let's not downplay a very important national exercise in the name of politics by limiting it to propaganda. This is an AG clout with the powers of the Constitution to do what
he told us. He's filing charges first.
And that is what he's doing. There's no politics. It is public interest.
Thank you.
But just
and comes back to tell us he's filing charges in
30
July.
seconds.
Yes. You see, I think out of all this investigations and the subsequent activities to follow in court, we should also start asking questions about the way and manner some of our state agencies and institutions operate. We cannot do that exercise and just overlook that angle. For example, the Audit Service or Office of the Auditor General, I'm very clear in my mind that they audit this institution called NSS or NSA, depending on the time, on an annual basis. Did something go wrong?
What goes through the audits? What's accounted for is what the auditor looks at.
Yes, but you see,
what's not accounted for, the auditor will not look at.
What they did were not forensic audits, but issues relating to ghost names, head counts, and all of this.
Yes, is the names presented to the auditor that they work with?
No, I work in Kolibu. Even last week, there was a head count. Every year you go through the head count.
All right.
You go there in person. There should be validation of your NIA card, your pay slips, your promotion letters, and what have you.
Right.
So if you have an area like the National Service where people come in and exit within a short period, I think that there should be a lot more focus, especially when in 2015, 2016, there were issues.
That's right. That's right. And the questions have also come up about this particular company that, Gift Oware is said to have used the NSS's 30 million as collateral for the loan. So what's it about the bank that gave this particular loan? Didn't he see that this is NSS money and it cannot be used as a collateral for a private entity? Okay, I'm sure in due course we'll hear her as well. But Sule, I just wanted you quickly on this one before we take a break and come to the silence frequencies, quote unquote. You are excited that the AG is doing these things and updating the public. You blew the whistle. But there's the potential, do you think about it or you don't, that the people may be put before court and in the end, it will turn out to be something else, that they are not guilty, nothing wrong has happened. Are you thinking about that? Well, as those who blew the whistle.
I think anything is possible. Sometimes, I remember when we were doing our MPhil media law, and we're doing defamation. Professor Kumado will give us a scenario. Then we say, we'll do our own analysis to prove whether it is defamatory or not. And then he says, you guys are making one mistake. Why? Because you think English, you think law is English. So anything is possible. But I think what is quite clear is the fact that the National Service payroll was bloated, and that there is absolutely no doubt about that.
So you'd be disappointed if things turn around other way?
Well, if it turns out that, yes, the bloating happened, but nobody was a beneficiary or it wasn't orchestrated by anyone, the monies were being paid to some institutions
and therefore we cannot hold these people accountable. Well, that's at the end of the day, that's what the courts would say.
Okay.
But I just want to briefly touch on what Dr. Jansen said in terms of how our institutions work. Something, if I'm an auditor and you present me with the figures, yes, I'm supposed to go by the figures. But sometimes you also wonder. So, for example, if in 2022, 2023, it is announced that, or let's look at 2021, 2022, total number of service personnel, 110,324. Then the following year, you are presented with a figure of 179,000. From 110 to 179,000. I think this should be something that should raise some bit of curiosity. What happened? From 110 to 179,000.
So investigation should extend beyond what is currently
exactly.
going on. Okay.
And a lot, we had a lot. In fact, we had a contractor who told us that, in fact, the way he was paid was wrong. And he wondered why they did that and why the banks also paid him.
Okay.
Because he said when he presented it, he thought that the banks would have blocked the check that was issued to him.
So we're taking a break here, but there's something you have been advertising. Look at the screen. It's a surprise to you, right? You didn't expect this. So independent journalism is expensive. It costs to sustain the kind of impactful journalism we have been producing over the years. Please screen, go up. That's important to me. Yeah. So they say donate to support us, and they put an account number, the Media Foundation for West Africa, account number 0555 095594 0555 095594. That's the fourth estate.
This is a Momo number or a bank account number?
This is a bank account. This is a Momo number.
But I should say thank you so much for the opportunity. But people
yes, because we know you are an NGO.
Yes.
Is that your CSR?
Let him finish what he said. Let him finish what he said.
I should say that I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And beyond this, people can actually go on the website of the MFW. There's a donate page where you can donate via, whether you want to do it via bank, Momo, whatever it is.
And you get sued, in particularly nuisance suits.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we currently have quite a few number of cases in court.
Right.
Those of you who are lawyers here, welcome.
Right.
Honorable give
We'll have to do some
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And in the NSS matter, when they filed the suit, on their blind side, stopped them. Later, we had to go to court.
Exactly.
I'm proud to represent them.
Give you a lot of
and it was a nuisance suit, and it was obvious. Once we step in the courtroom, the whole thing was thrown out. So there's no more suit. So this is Newsfile, and it's brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fie. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on MTN to join My Way today. Flamingo Paint, simply superior. Syntex Tanks, it's strong, it's tough. And Activa International, they are proud to be associated with Newsfile. Last week, I mentioned to you that after the Eid, it is Father's Day, and Konati Clothing, which is to let you know that the 10% discount for all orders that you make for your outfit like mine is still ongoing until the end of June. So simply call Konati Clothing on 0244 676732. 0244 676732. We'll be right back to find out if there was political motivation in the shutdown of radio stations. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as we always do, we put Ghana very top on the agenda. And my guests in the studio doing the discussion and also via Zoom, Mary Ada of the Transparency International Ghana, Suleiman Ibrahima of the Media Foundation for West Africa, the Fourth Estate, the Data Journalism, Investigative Journalism Hub, Dr. Justice Jansen, lawyer and former General Secretary of the GMA, Andrew Oware-Mensah, lawyer, former Member of Parliament for Sekandi, and Sharif Mahmood Khalid. The thing he's stopping me from doing, I disagree. Okay, so Dr. Sharif Mahmood Khalid is economic advisor to the Vice President. So, as you may be aware, there was issue of non-compliance in respect of the broadcasting regulations, and some stations suffered a suspension of their frequencies, even though it was very brief, for violation of regulations in a recent audit conducted by the NCA, that is the National Communications Authority. So over 60 of them became casualties, including Asase Radio and Wuntumi. Of course, these are the entities that bring the issue to the fore. And before anybody could say Jack, we were told that President Mahama had directed an amnesty for some 30 days for all of these stations. So because of that, they are back on the airwaves, hoping that they will rectify the non-compliances within that period. Issues have been coming up. Suleiman Ibrahima, you in 2017 led this, vehement opposition to the shutdown of, at the time, over 100 stations. Why are you singing a different story today? Are you really?
Right. So you're right. In 2017, 2019, we had a very tough battle with the NCA in the government at the time, and we went all the way to the courts because the NCA had refused to release certain data to us after we clearly exposed what was obviously a politically motivated activity that was undertaken. And that was on the basis of analysis that we had done that showed clearly that a number of radio stations that were allowed to remain on air had actually committed the same infractions for which the other dozens had been shut down. So at that time, we were very clear that we are not opposed to regulatory compliance or enforcement of the law. But if you are enforcing the law, then you must enforce it in a fair and justified way. But we had situations where certain radio stations that had defaulted once in terms of renewal had been shut down. And we saw others that had defaulted for more than 3 times or 4 times allowed to be on air. And these were stations that we knew were obviously owned by persons who were politically affiliated. I don't want to mention names, but if that will make it maybe clearer. For example, Radio XYZ was shut down, and they had gotten their frequency in 2011. They ought to have renewed in 2016. So they didn't renew, and they had been shut down. Oman FM got their frequency in 2006, and they had not renewed all that while, and yet were not shut down. We can look at a number of other stations. So our problem was the fact that it was done in a very partisan way, and we said, look, what has happened is actually a way to mute the voices of the opposition party at the time. And so we're very clear, enforce the law, but be very, very transparent and fair with it. So in February this year, if you recall, the new government shut down some 6 radio stations. And we issued a statement, and then this is the headline we gave: shutdown of radio stations in Ghana. New government is treading an old dangerous path. And here we issued a caution that we hope this is not the same thing that the previous government had done that this government is doing. And I remember having a conversation with the minister, Honorable Sam George, and saying, look, what I want to know, who are the owners of these stations and all of that. So when this particular one happened, again, we had that conversation, and I looked at the data and analyzed it all. And I realized, okay, if a radio station owned by Dr. Dufo has been shut down, Akwini FM owned by Honorable Delasoa, former MP for Kwando, has been shut down, and Nyansapor Radio in Shama, owned by the current fisheries minister, Emilia Atta, has been shut down for the same offenses that Asase and Wuntumi and the others have also been shut down, then of course, it's a fair way of going about it, and it's a transparent way of going about it, and the partisanship that we had seen in the previous exercise isn't there.
And therefore, we cannot say, for the sake of media freedom and so on, let radio stations do whatever they want. Look, in the case of Wontumi, for example, I've looked at previous communications that
very quick, so that Ejapa will come.
2022, there was a letter to them saying, look, you are in breach of the regulatory guidelines. And one of them was that your transmitter is in Kokomlemle, and by law, you are supposed to move it out to a place called Ajengote or something. And they indicated in the letter that because your transmitter is in Kokomlemle, it is interfering with other frequencies within the same area, and the rule is that you must move it out. 2022, it happened, they didn't move. 2023, they were reminded, they didn't move. And so, how do you say, oh, because it is owned by Wontumi, even though they are doing all this, allow
earlier
them?
When it happened in 2017 and President Akufo-Addo was asked to intervene, he said he won't intervene. People should follow the law. President Mahama has intervened. Is this right? Does he have power under the law to do what he has done in the name of clemency?
Well, powers under the law, I'm not sure. I think that I asked a friend, for example, how can the minister do suspensions and within hours the president orders the minister to suspend the suspensions? A series of suspensions happening within, and is it that? And I listened to the minister on Joy when he said, well, the president had been consulted prior to the decision that was made. And so I asked myself, was it just a PR gimmick, that was being...
Thank you. Hold on for me. Yes, Ejapa.
I guess that he's answered the issue by his closing comments. Pure PR, nothing else.
That's a question he asked.
Oh, no, but of course, it goes without saying. Because knowing how our governance system works, I'm not so sure the minister, especially with respect to the sensitivity of radio station ownership and what had transpired in the past, would take this step without recourse to the presidency. And like you said, he himself confirmed that the president had been engaged. So is it a case that they sat together and said that, well, go ahead and do it, and then after that, consistent with the narrative that I want to paint about my...
Is that not the bigger problem with our democracy? That we have laws, institutions have been empowered to take actions, and yet they have to defer to the president, who doesn't even have a power on that issue.
I'll come there. But, to confirm that indeed, this is nothing but to throw dust in the eyes of the public. That, Mr. Mahama, the president, is, some tolerant president. He is in favor of press freedom, and that even though the minister has exercised some power under the law, or the NCA has done so, he, in his nature, like the statement that my good friend and brother Felix released, sought to suggest, has asked them to it's all theatrics and no more. Okay. Oh yeah, exactly.
But some say this is better than Akufo-Addo saying go to hell.
So then again, you go back to the law. Was President Akufo-Addo right in insisting that the right things be done?
I believe so.
And it is not the case that only NBC people stations were impacted in 2017. Because at the time I was a member of the communications committee. Joe Osei-Wusu, the first deputy speaker station, was closed down in 2017. Okay, I'm not so sure this time around. Nyansapo, I thought it was for Ato late Ato.
Okay.
Oh, the former.
He's
the one that I thought
I've just about.
But assuming that it was even owned by the current fisheries minister, I would be surprised with what we know now.
I have just a minute
that
left.
This is all a charade.
I have just a minute left. Let me give that to Mary.
About the government.
Let me give that to Mary. Mary is still with us. Mary, what do you say about these things, about discriminatory approach to the application of the law?
So, Samson, I would say that if there are issues of inconsistencies in the application of the law in the past, and there have also been political bias in it, And today we are seeing for a fact, as Sule has indicated, and then I looked into it as well, that we need to move from the political issues around victimization, which we advocate against, to some level of sanity in the process. And I believe that in all of this, we are going forward as a people, knowing that some of these things cannot be accepted. We cannot switch over whenever there is a transition to do some of the things we are doing. Is it only during transitions that people do not comply? If there are non-compliance issues, people should be sanctioned.
Okay, the president should stay off and allow the institutions to do their work.
And again, I said that even though the president is doing a very good job at all of this, in this case, I believe that he should have allowed the law to work.
Thank you very much. Our time is up. Mariada, Samuel Akolgo, Suleiman Ibrahima, Justice Yangsin, Oware-Mensah, and Sharif Mahmoud Khalid. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. Have a good afternoon. This has been Newsfile.